episode of Pristine Connections podcast. We are here with the Zoe Martin. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. I appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. We're just going to dive in. Tell me a little bit about yourself and family. I'd love to know a little bit more about you.
I've been married for 28 years to my sweet Babu. I joke with people when they try to remember our names. I say, like Frankenstein, it's Frank and Zoe, so that sticks. And then we've got 3 wonderful children, 25, 23, and 28. 25's getting married in September, so.
That's exciting.
Yeah, that's happening.
Yeah.
So
Is it a daughter?
Yeah,
my
daughter.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, so y'all are deep in wedding planning.
Only girl, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a little stressful for her.
I imagine. Is it local?
It is, but
Yeah.
I keep telling her, you have the man, you have the dress. You don't need to have this wedding if you don't want to.
Yeah.
So it's going to happen, but she's really stressed.
For sure. Yeah. Well, so as somebody that takes a lot of photographs, how has it been like planning, finding photographers and videographers? Do you have somebody that you know that's doing it, or did she pick somebody random?
So I suggested that she use my favorite person for photography. My favorite person, I worked at a studio in Midland, Texas, and she was everybody's favorite. Actually, the studio owner even told me, she's like, I don't readily share this, but she's better than I am. And so, so I called her as soon as we found out that the wedding date and was like, hey, Jenna, do you have room for us? So she's driving from the hill country to come photograph the wedding for me.
That's awesome. That's really exciting. Well, I'm happy for y'all. What about your other 2?
My other 2, 23-year-old, he has a very interesting life. He blogs. He's got a YouTube channel, and he had Patreon subscribers during the pandemic. He was 19. He jumped in his Jeep, he took his Husky, and they lived off the land because he was getting a paycheck and didn't have to work. So they were gone for a year till he ran out of money. Now he's home.
Wow.
So he's in transition now, looking for a job, social media, video.
That's right. We talked about that. That's exciting.
20-year-old, he has been at Chick-fil-A for 5 years. So moving up wasn't his 5-year plan. Not his 10-year plan, but he's like, everything, it's just working out. So
I've heard great things about working at Chick-fil-A, just scholarships they offer to students that are graduating. I mean, just the benefits they get as well. I mean, it's a solid franchising opportunity too.
And to get hired there, it's really, I mean, you've got to be a very high caliber person. You can't just come in, from the street. So I believe when he does find another position, it's going to bode very well that he's been a loyal employee at Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's exciting. Y'all have a really fun-filled life.
Yeah.
And I always see different colors in your hair. Talk to me about that.
My CPA, I went to him and I said, hey, my branding, it's blue and green. Like everybody knows they're going to see me in blue or green. And can I write that off? And he laughed and he's like, the color is a marketing expense, not the cut, not anything else, but the color. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So it's branding.
I love that. That's really great. So talk to me how about how you got into the industry. Obviously you do a wide range of jobs. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay. The photography, back when my kids were little, Ann Geddes was super popular. I don't even know if you're old enough to know who she is. You may remember like teddy bear. There were little teddy bear babies, and they would sit on a shelf, or there would be blue gingham behind them. They were in a flower pot, and their face was like the flower.
Oh.
It was a super popular thing, but Ann Geddes was the first one that photographed babies professionally, and other photographers told her, people will not pay for this. And she opened the floodgates for maternity and newborn photography.
Wow.
So I couldn't afford to have a professional newborn photographer, and so I started educating myself. I've always had a camera in my hand. Like grandfather, I have his collection of cameras and things. So
cool.
I decided that I wanted to have photos like that of my children. And so I learned they didn't get photos like that, but now I can take them for other people. So that's where that started.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then video, I added video in during COVID. We were at home and we weren't, able to photograph people. And so I started educating myself with video production, and I did some one-to-one in a class. And so I started doing that, built up a lot of gear. Oh my word. Gear is a black hole. Once you get started buying equipment and lenses, it's incredible the amount of money that we spend.
I imagine.
Yeah.
I imagine. What about, what's your take on, iPhones versus camera equipment? Because the new iPhones take great photographs.
They do. And if you understand lighting and, well, obviously they're not great with your audio. So, I mean, hence we're not using, cheap microphones, right? Yeah. So there's a lot to play into, not just, you can put a phone in front of you. Everybody takes pictures. Everybody takes video, but it's oh my word, the C word that is not coming to my mind right now. It's how you get your angles and your perspective and things. It really, you have to know what you're doing. For instance, a lot of people don't have a clue when they're taking a picture or video with a window behind them. Cameras see light.
Yep.
And so the people are dark if they don't have any front light coming in, and that's why, everything behind them is well lit. So you have to have that understanding. But yeah, I think, I know people that shoot video well with the iPhone and photos. Time Magazine had a cover with the iPhone photo. So they're good, but you have to know what you're doing.
Sure, absolutely. That's neat. I like that you've even transitioned during, COVID, obviously, that your industry obviously took a big hit. So that's great that you transitioned to something new. I know you podcast, I know you network. Talk about some of your networking experiences.
Oh my goodness, there's
everywhere.
So many, which is really funny. I just posted recently about this too, that when I was in Longview, we just moved here 2 years ago. When I was in Longview, I joined the chamber, went to a lot of events, and I was so uncomfortable. I would just kind of stand by myself. If I saw someone I knew, I would saddle up to them, and I would stand beside them, and I would just kind of listen. I didn't say anything. And one of my mentors, she said, you know what? Do you have some time next week? I want you to come to my office. So we met, and she said, look, you have a great personality. You have got a great business model. I really think that you need to put yourself out there a little bit more. Don't be shy. Like, everybody's new at some point, right? And so just step in and, hey, I'm new. I don't know anybody, whatever. And so she kind of guided me on how to step into the arena of networking. And then I started scheduling one-to-ones. And I think that's probably a key component that a lot of people don't get. They show up to networking events and they may collect business cards, but then never do anything with them. There's no follow through. And networking requires you to make connections. If you're not making connections, you're not really doing what needs to be done to build a business.
Yeah, absolutely. So you obviously are assisting with the Pristine Connections group. So talk to me about that journey. I know you're literally brand new, like a couple weeks. So how has it been so far?
It's been really fun. So Josh is very personable. I like the way he thinks. So when we were interviewing and he's explaining to me how when he started networking, he was going to a lot of different ones and they're very similar. And then he wanted to change the game. And so he explained it to me and I'm watching it happen, which I mean, we do things differently. And I like that because basically everyone else is the same. And they 30-second pitch, a speaker, everybody leaves. So, I mean, it's unusual for people to stay for any length of time after a meeting. And then there's people that show up late. And so, they're in and out and they're missing opportunities. Yep. So I think with Pristine Connections, there's so many add-ons that they just make sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. I mean, you and I have networked in multiple groups together. We're still in multiple groups together. And that's the one thing I've noticed and appreciate about Pristine Connections too. It's just the diversity of options that you get and just the different speakers that we have or, trainings that go on because everybody wants to take away something, not just, oh, I met so-and-so today or so-and-so today and we're going to talk. Like I actually spent an hour of my time, learned something, and then also made connections instead of just, hey, cool, okay, I'll see you next week.
Well, and even after I started connecting or linking them on posts and inviting people to come. And I've had a couple of guests, and they've all, I mean, even before they came, they said, this sounds like, something that I'm looking for because it's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think it's huge in a world, I mean, DFW is so large and there's business for everybody. There's a lot of networking groups for everybody, but you want something different. And it's not always about happy hours and, events. Like it's just nitty gritty networking that I think people just really miss out on sometimes. And they just feel uncomfortable. Like you said, you didn't want to talk to anybody. And I was that way in my podcast I did for the group a couple months ago. Like I hated networking. I did. I was like, there's a time and place for it, but I'm very intentional about what I do go to.
Yeah.
I think some people just go to whatever, but I'm like, no. Like, if I'm taking time out of my day, we're here,
Yeah, for sure. There was something else you made mention of the speakers. I also like that Josh is intentional with the speakers. Like, he wants topics that are educational. We're not just saying, this is me and this is what I do.
Yes, absolutely. Something that y'all could take away, because some people like maybe not have structured their business correctly or are in a transition with their business, and maybe that speaker that day like actually spoke to them and are able to help them, get out of a situation or what have you. So I absolutely agree with that. So what led you into your career currently, and what led you into networking, since you said you had really just started?
Yeah, well, I was working before Longview. I was in Midland, Texas. I was working at a studio there, and that's where I actually started my business. It was a roundabout way that I got hired by the studio. She'd been in business for 15 years, and I called her because I wanted to have my camera cleaned, and I wanted to ask someone if the local camera store would be a good option, or if I should maybe come to Dallas to get it cleaned. And when I called, I was surprised that she answered the phone, and her office administrator had been stepped out for lunch, and so I actually got to talk to the owner of the studio, and I'm like, you know what? And by the way, she told me it doesn't matter where you take your camera to get it cleaned, it's going to get sent to Canon. So if anybody needed to know that, when I found out it was the studio owner, I said, I'm new. I would really appreciate a set of eyes on my website if you could critique that for me.
Yeah.
And she said, hey, I'll call you back tomorrow, but yeah, I'll take a look. Well, the next day came and she didn't call me back. And I was like, oh, well, she's busy. Been in business for 15 years. She's busy. She's got an office administrator. And so a couple of days later, she called me back and she said, hey, Zoe, I would like to offer you the opportunity to interview to be a second for wedding photography. And I laughed. I'm like, nay, weddings are not anything I'm remotely interested in. And she's like, I'm looking at your work and I think that you would be a good fit. Why don't we just come in and talk about you're not responsible as the second. Mm-hmm. The first photographer, everything lays on them. The second is really kind of there for details and getting images that are important for kind of like B-roll for video, taking what's going to be showing up little sparses in the album. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'll think about it. And so then I'm writing out a list of questions. If I work for a studio, what are the pros? What are the cons?
Yeah.
I mean, she'll be able to teach me more things. It's just going to be a really neat environment, but then I can't work for myself and I don't choose what I photograph. And so I went in and I met her and she just had great energy. She was such a fun person to work for. I can tell you stories of the goofy things that we did. And we were a similar age, so we really connected. And so I went home and I thought about it and decided to work for her. And then one of the things is a non-compete. That's definitely a negative, signing on to work for someone else.
Yeah.
So I had to work for her. And one of my questions about that, have you ever had to fire somebody? Because that was, whether you fired or you quit, you are a non-compete within X amount of radius. Mm. And so, there was that question. She said she did have to fire somebody who didn't show up to a wedding. I'm like, oh, that's terrible, right? Oh. Right? That happens. So I went ahead and worked for her. I worked at the studio for 5 years, and then we moved to Longview, opened the studio there, and then COVID. And then my husband, he got a promotion. He works for Pepsi. He's been there 25 years. And we had to move to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And the cities around here, the individual cities are huge, but then you've got the Metroplex combined. And I'm like, oh, my word. We didn't know where we were going to live. And we landed in McKinney. And I have a great studio that I share with other photographers. Love, love, love. Downtown McKinney, there's an organization called the Mill House. It's a nonprofit. It's a creative, collaborative space for women. And so we have a photography studio that has professional lighting, light meter, backdrops, and everything. Yeah. And we've got hair and makeup studios and dressing rooms. It's really fabulous. And
that's awesome.
I feel very connected, with the photography community, which was something I didn't have at the studio. We had 5 photographers. We could shoot 3 weddings a weekend. But definitely stepping out of that, becoming my own person, being able to connect with other photographers, other videographers. I really like to collaborate, and I like to build community. And even in the group in Pristine, there's another photographer. I took her headshot. We're friends. So I love that we can embrace each other and help each other out. I remember one time I went on vacation and somebody called me about a headshot, and I contacted Karen and I was like, hey, I'm gone, but maybe you can help this guy. So having that connection is I like to have other photographers and videographers in my back pocket.
That's great. It's connection, not competition, which is huge. Wow, I love that. That's a great story. Talk to me about just risks that you've taken in your business. I mean, did moving impact you quite a bit? I mean, what's it been like?
Yeah, actually, I just talked to Eden and Gavin the other day because the competition here is very stiff for photographers. So for me, it has been critical. Networking has been a very critical thing so that I'm getting to meet people individually because that's how we work when you get to know somebody, like them, and trust them with your services. So with the competition, I think if I were relying on SEO, my business would have tanked. But having the opportunity to network and get to know people and have collaborations and things, that's been really beneficial to me. The risks that I take, I swear that rabbit hole of gear, I just can't stop myself sometimes. And I really try to say, okay, this year I'm only going to spend this much, but I'm terrible with budgeting too. So that's a whole nother conversation, but I'm working on it.
That's funny. I'm sure your CP is like, please just don't like.
Yeah. Like it seems like everything I make goes back into my business, and I'm never going to make a profit doing that. So I've got to figure out, that's a little cycle.
Yeah. That's funny. What are some fun projects that you enjoy photographing? Like, what's your favorite thing to photograph?
Women.
Okay.
Or men solo. Like, there's an online publication called City Box Dallas. Like, they have Atlanta, LA, they're big cities. And Marian Aiken recently came to Dallas and started the publication here. And a friend of mine that I met through networking said, hey, I'm going to be on the cover. Would you be my photographer? And I was like, absolutely, I'd love to do that for you. So I had him come to the studio, and what was really cool is after the publication came out, the next gentleman in Dallas who was going to be featured was like, I really like his images. You're local. Can we talk? And so I got to go and shoot him in downtown Dallas and have his face be the cover for the next magazine. And so, I didn't realize how much I enjoyed photographing men solo because women are really critical. Yes. We are, obviously people look at a group photo, they find themselves, but women will critique our nose, our eyebrows, our hair, our weight, our clothes, just very self-critical. Men aren't usually like that. And so they're freer, and a lot of people, I don't remember if it was you or somebody I was talking to recently, like, I don't know what to do with my hands. I'm like, oh my goodness, I love to help guide people into poses. I don't tell them necessarily to do this, but I will help them along so that a way what I see, I want them to see themselves the way other people see them, not critically.
I love that. That's so great. Well, tell me a little bit more about, your role in networking and kind of just a little bit about what you're doing for Pristine, just before we wrap up.
Okay. With Pristine, I think one of the things, and I thought it was really funny when Andrew came to me and said, I'm just watching you, and I don't realize people are watching me, right? I'm just doing what I do. So it's important to me, let's say somebody is new to a group, I've been there. I know what that's like. And so I will take them and I will introduce them to other people. This just happened last night. The Girl Cave had an open house, and I saw someone I didn't recognize, asked her how she found out about the group. And she's like, oh, I just met Krista on Thursday and she told me about this. So I came. I don't know anybody. And I'm like, fantastic. Let me introduce you to some people. So I walked her over and I introduced her to people, and she made connections, and she's actually in marketing. And so she's like, I need a photographer. And I'm like, well, this is a, do you know Ashley Bledsoe with Hydromulch?
Her name sounds really familiar, actually.
So Ashley was there, and I introduced her to Ashley, and Ashley texted me today, and she's like, thanks so much. She's a great connection. And, I feel like when you're open to understanding that there's enough business for everybody, we don't always get along with people just because they're in our networking group.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I really just like about Industry Exclusive. We know a bazillion realtors. We know a bazillion photographers, So another cool thing about getting connected and meeting people, when you're thinking outside of your own industry and not trying to make a sale, you can help other people.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing that's really cool about Pristine is that Josh did not make it an industry exclusive group. There's other landscapers, there's roofers, there's remodelers, but Pristine offers all of those services. Yeah. But Josh understands that it's not necessarily it's a sale. I have to make a sale, and I don't want anybody else, encroaching on my territory. It's not like that for him. And I'm the same way, so I can connect. Yeah. There was something I was going to say, and I know it's not going to come to me, but basically, I was at a networking group. There was a gentleman that told me he had a need for a certain service. So I thought, okay, I know 2 people that are possibilities. I connected him with them. They're meeting next week. So if you expand and give possibilities to people, just because you know a bazillion, maybe you connect with a handful. Yeah. Give people the option. These are the X amount that I recommend.
Yeah, I agree with that. Everybody is going to vibe, and people are going to work with people that they like, they know, they trust. Obviously, we've heard that saying a million times in networking, but it's true. I mean, you don't want to just connect with somebody. The way we share connections, too, is everything, because the last thing you want to do is accidentally introduce somebody that didn't do a great job, and then it almost falls back on you. Not almost, it just falls back on you. And you're like, well, you introduced me. And you're like, I'm so sorry.
That has happened one time, and I was so regretful. Yeah, that happened one time, and I am much more careful now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap? Anything that you'd like the viewers to know about you or your services?
So it was funny when we were talking about my business name, the Zoe Martin, it's not Zoe Martin Photography because I also shoot video, but I also do graphic design, and I build websites mostly for photographers.
That's great. I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We are excited to have you on, especially helping with Pristine, and we will see you next time.
Thanks.